Welcome to another UMFCCI webinar series, New Beginnings Through Renewed Partnerships. The word partnerships, so important these days. It's the partners that we work together to help develop our businesses and of course our economy. Today, in our webinar series, we'll be focusing on views from the West. And we're very, very lucky to have with us three distinguished guests, each of them representing the American Chamber of Commerce, the British Chamber of Commerce, and the French Chamber of Commerce. Representing the British Chamber of Commerce, we're very delighted to have Mr. Peter Bennion. Mr. Peter Bennion has been in the business world for a long, long time. He started his business career as a chartered accountant with a Big 4 firm. Now he is representative of a company called Jardines. Jardines in Myanmar focuses on Mercedes and even Pizza Hut. More importantly, Peter is in charge of the operations of Jardines in Cambodia and thus has an extensive experience of what it takes to develop businesses in Myanmar and in the region. Along with Peter, we have Paul Kimawe, representing AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce. I think Kimawe's business is one of the most important businesses that we need to help develop our countries. You would see them anywhere on the roads. These are what you call the big caterpillar excavators and the things that are needed and the machinery, the industrial machinery that are needed to help develop the infrastructure in our country. Mr. Ukimawe is also the chairman of the Myanmar Cycling Federation, and again he is one of the most talented Myanmars that I have been very honored to meet during my business time in Myanmar. Last but not least, we're also joined by Sarah Bijon. Sarah has an extensive experience in Myanmar. Sarah is, I think, if you look at her background, she is a perfect ambassador for the French Chamber of Commerce. She originally started her life in Myanmar as a commercial attaché with the French embassies. 3 years after that, she took the decision to actually leave the French embassy and start her own business, focusing on facial care products. And again, we're very lucky to have her with us. So with our distinguished guests, again, thank you all for joining us. We look forward to have a discussion on the views from the West in regards to what's actually happening over here. So the first question is, how are your members coping with this crisis? Could you start off, Peter, by telling us how your members are coping with this pandemic, please?
Umocho, thank you very much indeed. Very interesting question. Indeed, what are the major issues affecting our members? And I think this issue is probably best approached from two different aspects. One is those directly or indirectly attributable to the prevailing unprecedented times as a result of the global pandemic. And then secondly is the more systemic issues that are derived from the ongoing business environment in Myanmar. If we look at the pandemic itself, which has caused economic meltdown across the globe, though the stock markets, I have to say, don't reflect this as they're hitting some highs. But let's focus on the pandemic itself and here in Myanmar. Business volumes have, of course, been impacted significantly, and all the corporates have had to tighten their belts, with smaller and medium-sized enterprises probably the hardest hit. This has curtailed cash flows, and all businesses are in a survival mode and very much managing for cash, and managing for cash is very much the mantra. The Myanmar economy is now obviously being restructured to focus on domestic demand, with international trade largely all but choked off. I'm thinking here particularly of the garment and the hospitality sectors, which have been most impacted, which are most connected internationally, and those which have been most impacted. And businesses are then being forced to resize and obviously look at new ways of doing business, be that online or expanding into new business channels and new ways to market. And it would be useful to look at certain businesses which are taking advantage of the COVID as well as the disadvantages. And if you look at things like the life insurance businesses, which are relatively new into this market, and these businesses are moving straight to a digital platform. And obviously digital platform the buzzwords of today. So indeed, many of these life insurance businesses are using cutting edge technology into bringing their new business here into Myanmar. So, and this is far ahead of what they have in all the other markets. So they're bypassing all paperwork and going straight to digital. Travel restrictions have locked out business people from traveling to Myanmar, which has obviously impacted trade and the possibility of new business and doing new investment. People have just not been able to get and to participate. So when we had the solar tender recently, when we were engaged to try and bring some of our international partners in to look at this trade, they were not able to be on the ground and to actively put a tender in place. Plus, of course, you have the other major impact of the restriction on travel is that critical equipment can't get serviced by overseas expert engineers who would otherwise be coming in on a regular basis to undergo critical maintenance and critical servicing of this equipment. They're just not able to fly in and carry out that work if we don't have the expertise on the ground. And I think the second element, which all our businesses are then looking at, is the resizing of the operations, looking at their physical operations, where you're looking at where people have been asked to work from home, and to look at how they operate their business. And this will obviously look at impact business and impact the real estate market in the long term. If one's looking at systemic issues which are facing this market, these are the ongoing issues of doing business in Myanmar, which we've highlighted many times in the past: access to finance, access to land, access to utilities, and access to human capital. These were all issues that were highlighted in the Myanmar Ease of Doing Business by the World Bank in 2014. But I think on top of this, I'd just like to add the issue of the inconsistent application of the rule of law, which is proving an increasingly unsettling to our members, to the extent that certain international, multinational investors are seeking actually to use this as an opportunity to withdraw from the country. Not because of the COVID, but because they are being blocked from taking rational business decisions by the authorities, or actually ignoring or rewriting the rule of law for the applications of one party over another. And this is particularly galling when in the current difficult business environment, and especially whereby the government is promoting development of business. I think that these are the major issues, Khumocho, I'd like to introduce at this time. And there are many others, but I think these are the critical issues I would like to raise at this juncture.
Okay. Thank you very much, Peter. Extremely comprehensive over here. And I hope our subtitles will do you justice when we have this all edited ready. I think one of the big things that we have to really consider is the health issue. And unfortunately, and it's a disaster that America is facing the worst from the pandemic. So I'd like to ask you, Kim Alwyn, how are your members coping with this health issue? America, the statistics, they're 25% of the cases for the whole world. So how are your members coping with this crisis here in Myanmar?
Thank you, Khumocho. Good morning, everybody. Let me introduce a bit about AmCham. As AmCham, we promote American business and encourage local companies to partner with American business. So we have 100% American-owned companies, and we also have Myanmar companies having partnerships with or representing American business. And the question you asked and what we are facing today is basically this pandemic is not over yet. More viruses lurking out there, and the movement restrictions impacting our lives and our business are probably the biggest challenges that we are facing today. The fact that if the virus return and you see it spread, then you got to lock down, and it restricts the business activity, and that is a single this threat to the business today. And the government response to pandemic, it can vary from one country to another, and following business and consumer behaviors are knock-on effects. So some of our members are still trying to return. It's still a challenge for continental travels and even regional travels. So return to normality it may take a while. And the reality is this is the greatest challenge that we are facing, according to some folks, since World War II. And businesses don't really have a playbook how to deal with it. So what they're going through for American business and AmCham members is similar to what many businesses around the world and in Myanmar are facing today. Our members are in many sectors, varying in business volumes from SMEs to very, very large American energy and tech companies. Many are facing challenges like reduced income, less opportunity, maintaining productivity levels, and growing concerns about cash flow and liquidity. Sectors like travels, tourism, hotels, real estate are pretty smashed. A few others, like tech sector, are also seeing incredible growth in times like this. But in Myanmar still presents tremendous amount of opportunities. But crisis has also opened up new opportunities in other markets elsewhere with competitive tech structures, no red tapes, better transparency, and very, very attractive cost of doing business and asset prices, revalue asset prices. So for some investors, it's a different challenge, making the call whether to stay and expand or downsize or even leave and go somewhere else. This can be the case, especially in the sectors like energy and electricity, where markets have to compete for that capital. On the other hand, many of our members take a holistic approach in partnerships. With a focus on developing local workforce, many can realize the benefits of training that they've been working on all these years, retaining and promoting local workforce. So they're finding new ways of supporting, developing, expanding local competencies through virtual support. We're seeing many positive trends like that. And considering, commodity prices globally, including non-energy like metal and minerals, we're seeing some positive trends. So not all that doom and gloom globally, including markets in the United States. I mean, considering what the US is going through and the ability to deal with it, it looks bad probably for many reasons that I'm not an expert on to comment on that. But the reality is the size of the US, the sheer economic power, innovation out there, and ability to actually recover from crisis like that. You have seen how US recover from many events in the past. So it is it's still too early to talk about how we can respond. But under high uncertainties today, majority of businesses here, our members, continue to face challenges. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. It's reassuring, and again, your perspective of what's happening around the world and showing us that there could be a possible light at the end of the tunnel. I'd like to go over to Sarah. The French Chamber of Commerce was one of the, in fact, if you look through the history, it's one of the oldest Chamber of Commerce. It was quite active during the military days, and one of the first companies, Total, was the first real company that helped start to develop our country. So with the history that all your members have, how are they doing? Is anybody have to close their business? Are they really keen to continue, or is there just one thing that's stopping them to continuing? So your viewpoints on what your members are going through at this current moment, please, Sarah.
Thank you, Komocho. So let's face it, COVID will be there for a long time. We will live with it forever. So let's say it's the new normal, right? So our members have been facing the same issues as was mentioned by Peter and Ukin as well. One of our members, and this is an extreme case and very rare, has in fact, yes, closed down. But let's focus on those who are still there, and let's see how they have adapted and how they are coping with the COVID. So let's say most of them have embraced digitalization, and the embrace of digitalization for some will be for good because there's no turning back. So in a way, for those who was not very, used to the digital tools, they have to do it now. And once they have entered this, they cannot go back. So let's say some have found opportunities in this transformation. So they have been, involved in the online platforms. So what was perceived at first as emergency steps and measures to be taken will actually now become permanent. So of course, the role of all the chamber is to support and accompany our members through this process. So of course, everybody is doing like webinars, online trainings, online meetings. CCI, we have a Slack platform for networking. So it's another kind of online platform. Another point I wanted to raise here, and how is it affecting our member, is the fact that 3 days ago, we were informed that there were legitimate further travel restrictions that was put in place by Myanmar. So now we have been informed that per week there's a quota of 200 foreigners that could come in the country and 1,000 Myanmar national per week. So this will further hinder, the return of our members. So it will negatively and directly impact their return. So we really hope, and we really call for a revision of these quota measures. We were also involved as CCI with, 2 charter flights that were supposed to come, one from France. Another one was organized by some of our partners in Thailand. So both of the charter flights were canceled or postponed. So these are also further, let's say a bad news for any soon return of some of the members. So this can really hinder their businesses.
Thank you very much. Again, it's nice to see some examples of how your members are being affected. And I suppose is all members and all Myanmar businesses are going through the same issues. So there's that commonality that we all share. But one of the things that we've seen a lot of is surveys. And if you look at these surveys on how people are coping, one of the things that are worrying businesses is the global economy, the big global market. For so long in my history, if you think previous 7 or 8 years before, we've been very self-reliant, but now during the last 10 years, we're very now integrated with the global economy. And most of the Myanmar businesses were looking for this global economy to get us to the next step of development. But now you ask them what they worry about, is one of the biggest worries that they have is the global economy. And if that is all going down, does that mean that Myanmar is going to go down to a large extent? So one of the things, what does Myanmar have to look into? What does Myanmar need to do to lessen the global impact? Can Myanmar be more self-reliant, or what is going to be, what do you think the global economy, what do you think will be able to happen? So, Kokimawe, you touched on some issues previously in the previous question. Could you start off also, is what can Myanmar do to lessen the impact of the global economy?
Thank you, Komocho. It's a really interesting subject. If you look at this virus, I think we have the ability to respond to that. It's a common threat globally. So eventually we will be able to overcome this. Right? So if you look at the economy globally, some of the hardest hit sectors of the economy won't see a restart or turnaround until next year. I mean, that's a lot of projections out there. For Myanmar, let's start with the baseline that we should be looking at and some sort of pre-crisis levels. Myanmar economy, to our understanding, was on the uptrend and in expansion mode before this pandemic. And because of this COVID, World Bank's forecast on Myanmar's GDP growth for this fiscal year, which is actually ending very soon, is 0.5%. We understand that belongs to about 10% of countries globally who manage to stay above the water. And that's very, very positive in times like this. We also can't deny the impact and like I said earlier, knock-on effects in Myanmar. Some impacts are also disproportionate. For example, like travel and tourism sectors. And the pre-crisis challenges in some sectors are exaggerated when a pandemic hits like this. So let's talk about what can be done. So first, stay focused on preventing the spread of the virus. Uncontrolled spread means not much can be done about the economy. Second, work hard to create economic opportunities, that is encouraging transactions. Third, continue reforms and develop the right frameworks and remove the impediments or barriers to economic activity. Fourth, help improve cash flow and liquidity in private sector. So these are the points that, those are the things that Myanmar can do to lessen the impact. So based on these points, I will break our message to stakeholders in terms of understanding expectations from investors where we can actually increase the economic activity. So my message to lawmakers and Central Bank of Myanmar from here is frameworks like secure transactions law, government procurement law, and granting new license in lending, responsible lending, will help firms in Myanmar and actually will help firms in Myanmar by actually allowing investors bring in additional liquidity into the system. And that can be backed up by transparent legal framework that I mentioned earlier. Please elevate and empower agencies like Anti-Corruption Commission. I mean, that is a very, very good support, kind of check and balances, and actually that will help build responsible private sector, and you will cut down a lot of waste. Please work on these. Responsible actors of the economy, we're not in the business of buying and selling licenses or bringing in capital behind nominees, and that's not our business. The next point to the government of Myanmar, one, economic recovery will be faster when we have a trusted partnership between a responsible private sector and a market-friendly government, supported by a reliable and consistent regulatory framework. And in fact, Peter alluded to that earlier. Two, please focus on regulatory consistency and transparency by also speeding up corporatization to consolidate SOEs that Myanmar has today. This dual role of policymaker, regulator bodies, also managing SOEs, will lose all higher purpose and decisions will become arbitrary. This continues to be one of the major impediments that we are seeing in Myanmar. Three, we require certainty on investment frameworks, including sanctity of contracts, that is basically honoring obligations by both parties. The fourth is we also recommend the government to focus on master plans that you have come up with and not making last minute decisions. It's extremely hard for private sector to cooperate with you. For example, in energy sector, it doesn't make sense to implement emergency projects every year. Every year shouldn't be emergency. They're just some of the recommendations that AmCham made at last year's forum. Like I said, Myanmar economy is on the upturn before this pandemic. Let's keep working on things together to overcome these challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Ukimawin. Those are very strategic issues. And again, these are issues that we at UMFCCI will also help support and see what we can do to get that to the decision makers, to the stakeholders who have a say in how the company, or how the country should be run. On another aspect, when we look at the global impact, we always get to see statistics. Most of it is GDP growth. Peter, I understand that you're also in charge of Cambodia. So, you know, those global statistics, your market is what they call a GMS market, a developing economy market. Do those big global statistics of negative growth, will it really, really affect our region as a least developing country? with Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, and you know what needs to be done to lessen the blow. I think, in a strange sense, the least developed countries from this pandemic are the most luckiest because their levels were right down the world in terms of of the effects of the pandemic over here. So the global figures are really going to hurt us. Can we live with our own global figure, our own regional figures for growth? What are your viewpoints on that, Peter?
Thank you, Komocha. I believe that you're absolutely right. That those countries which are somewhat, the more disconnected you are from the world economy, then the less impacted you'll be. So actually, if you look at those three countries, if you look at Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, of the three, the most connected to the world market is actually Cambodia. It's a large exporter of it. The vast majority of its GDP is generated by the export of garments to the EU and to the US, and 25% of its economy is based on international tourism and a tourism business, base. So this economy, Cambodia of the three, is the most exposed to the world markets and the most impacted by the world the downturn in world trade. I mean, if you look at the major markets of the world, you see in Q2 the US GDP fell by 9.5%. Thailand, another immediate neighbor of ours, fell by 12.2%. Japan fell by 7.8%. And my own country, the UK, fell by 20%. These are big numbers that are being impacted here. Big numbers. These are huge numbers. The Eurozone, so in the US, you've seen over 55 million people file for unemployment. In the Eurozone, 30 million people are unemployed. With foreign investors, and foreign investors actually from the Eurozone have reported to have pulled out $26 billion of investment in the developing Asian economies. And that doesn't include a $16 billion that they're pulling out of India. So these economies are clearly impacted, and those which are lesser connected to the world economies that have been commensurately are not so impacted. So Myanmar has as U Co Win has said, is still in the positive growth for 2020. But it's not immune, but its relative isolation from world trade has indeed providing a buffer. So what can it do to lessen that impact? Well, I think you'll find that 2021 is going to be another year where it's going to have a major impact, because a major concern is actually the forced repatriation of millions of Myanmar workers who've been working in the markets overseas, in Thailand, in Malaysia, in Singapore. And the loss of the foreign remittances that these people would have otherwise made back to Myanmar is going to be a big loss to the not just to their families in Myanmar, but also to the foreign exchange earnings here. So this one, and the people, when they return, they will likely join the ranks of the unemployed here. So their savings will very soon run out, and 2021 is going to be a difficult year, I think, in my view, until they can get new jobs moving back overseas. But the Myanmar government has actually done with this COVID economic recovery plan, has done a great deal and has made a lot of impact too. To action and to lessen the impact on the economy. And it envisaged a 7-point plan to alleviate the impact of COVID, and their total package, I believe, is valued at something like $2.3 billion, which is not an insignificant sum of money in itself, but relatively insignificant when you look at the numbers that the larger economies are reinvesting, having to invest. When you're looking at the trillions of dollars that the US is committing to their recovery plan, and I think Singapore just announced a further $100 billion for their recovery plan, and they only have a population of 7 million. So the Myanmar per capita spend is relatively small. But the country is doing what it can and using what it can for a stimulus for action. And I hope that the government itself will actually start to use and to utilize the leverage in its own balance sheet to help improve and to stimulate the economy and to alleviate the downturn for in 2021. And I think that the major upside here will come in the inaction of the number of the infrastructure projects, which the country desperately needs if it wishes to engage and increasingly engage with the world economy in the future. That is in terms of port development, in terms of airport development, in terms of road and railway projects and bridge building that they need to go. So this is, and primarily I think, and I think U Khin has also touched on this, is the electrification plan, which has been long mooted in Myanmar to achieve full electrification by 2025, 2030. And to date, very little has actually been done except for the continuous round of emergency plans to try and regenerate the electricity plants here. So I think that these are the major issues which are ongoing, and there's plenty that can be done. And a lot of work has been done by DFID and the UK aid to assist Myanmar in actually to help leverage its balance sheet by looking at the issue of the issuance of government bonds. So the real continued development of the financial sector here. To come to the point that U Khin has mentioned before is that the lifeblood of the economy, small, medium and large businesses, is the money supply and indeed the health of the financial sector. So anything to build a credible market and to build the capacity of the market to be able to lend to the medium and to the small and the large companies, then that is obviously a requirement. And in order to be able to finance this, then I think the development of the bond market, the government bond market, I think is an essential part of that. Then the large and the long-term lenders into the market, such as the life insurance companies, which are just entering here, will actually be able to build their balance sheet and provide long-term funding to the government to invest in these infrastructure plans. So I think there's a lot of good positive work which has been done to date to help to alleviate the impact of the pandemic. So there are more than a few reasons to be cheerful, to be perfectly honest, U Khin.
Thank you very, very much on that over here. And again, it's so nice that all of you are mentioning that there could be a light at the end of the tunnel to help us recover. Going back to your point on Cambodia, one of the things that Myanmar was looking forward to was the tourism sector. Just Angkor Wat by itself does 5 million tourists a year. And when it comes to tourism, one of the biggest countries that have been supporting the Myanmar tourism industry is, of course, France. Yeah, with the global economy and all the difficulties that's happened over here for most of the big tourism industry that we have over here. That really helps, not only just helps develop our economy, but help develop the people. With the problem that we're having now, do we still see tourists coming in from France or Europe? So what do you think about that? What can be done to get, I've been back here 30 years. It was our contact to the world was the French tourists that came over here. So do you think that can be recovered, or what can be done to make sure that these tourists or tourists globally, especially from Europe, will think about coming back to Myanmar the first chance that they get? So Sarah, if you could comment on that, please.
Sure, thank you, Komocho. So of course, the first point to be made is that the Myanmar, tourism industry is one of the, if not the most impacted sector about what we're going through right now. So it's labor intensive, so it's vital to take actions. So just before we move on to letting international visitors coming back, let's focus on what actions can be done like right now. So again, it could be perceived as emergency or short term, but actually I will try to explain why it's not. So So one of the solutions that have been put up in place in the neighboring regions, because Thailand and Vietnam are also very dependent on tourism, is of course to boost the local industry. So this is something that Myanmar has been, looking into it, and it's let's say it's something that has already been a little bit initiated in the past. I can think of a very wonderful example was when FMI was still doing, comprehensive packages with the Bayview Hotel in Napali. So we saw already some little coordination of these actors. So now let's push it further and really call for a national organization coordination of all the local actors in transport. Could be, night buses, could be local airline, domestic flights industry, along with hotels, to promote also, tourism for the local residents, for the foreign residents, and why not some promote local, very, smaller cities like in Kaya State, like Loiko, or even go to the Chin State. They can also focus, on team building packages. So, so really, this is an encouragement for them. In doing so, they are preparing the structure of tourism because once this is, how can I say, very fluid and organized, then it could also, when the border open up, it could also be very easy for the international visitors to do the same. So in a way, it also makes Myanmar, more resilient, right? Because this is the basis. You're relying on yourselves, on what we have right now, before opening to the other investors. What I wanted to highlight here also is that for the international visitors, when they will be able to come back, especially the French one, so I really hope that the government will consider further visa exemptions, because it could be an incentive for Western tourists to come even more, because now for the French citizens, we must apply for a visa before getting into Myanmar. Another thing is that as a French chamber here, yes, of course, we are promoting, partnership between French companies, Myanmar companies, but we are also promoting Myanmar. We have put up a very nice digital campaign called #ComeToMyanmar. So this one was launched last year in November, and it's a thing that we have collaborated CCI France with the Myanmar Tourism Federation, and we will do it every year. It's a free of charge video that could be shared by all parties. It's on our Facebook page, and really it helps to promote Myanmar as a destination, both for the domestic level and for the international level. So this is something that we will do, continue to doing. So you can see there's a dozen video already ready, and it's a contest for each year. Another point I wanted to highlight also about what can be done to lessen the impact. So the point here for me is to keep the trade channel open. So we talked about the new opportunities, for the companies, for the members, but let's push it further because we talked about new opportunities in digitalization. If we push it further and we apply the digitalization process into the administration and the government institutions, then in a way, it can keep the trade level as it is. Because if we can imagine, for example, a paperless work with the customs, we can apply import-export documents online or apply for licenses online, then this will already help because there's travel restrictions, even though inside the country. So this can help. So we can, imagine, like, let's say the most obvious example and the most successful example of this is, of course, the transformation of DICA. So this is something that we would like to see in also other ministries and others institutions. And I'm sure that this is a way of keeping the trade channel open. So COVID, in a way, it's great to rush this digitalization process.
So Sarah, you was a commercial attaché for about 3 years with the French embassy. So you're in a position to see how foreign investments have changed over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think maybe before pre-COVID, it was maybe coming out. So what do you expect to see happen in the next 12 months with foreign investments? Those that want to come in, still going to come in? Are they going to wait? And more importantly, maybe you was talking about the leapfrog. Maybe this is the time where the government can relook at its foreign investment policies. What needs to be done more so that we can be competitive with countries such as Cambodia and Vietnam and maybe Laos. So what are your viewpoints on that, please, Sarah?
Yes, so I will focus mainly on two levels. So for sure, one thing is that the new investment, there will be a slowdown, okay, due to all the legitimate, the physical travel and all of, what we know that is going on now. But let's say I want to remain optimistic, and let's have a look of what we already have as a foreign investment, and that will keep going in the next few years, because it's those investments are long term. So two approach. So first of all, when you look on for the very large investor, okay, some investor, some French investor, oil and gas, etc., they have been here for decades. They were here before sanctions, they were here during sanctions, and now they are here during hard times too, COVID, and they will be here after COVID, if there's a after COVID. So let's say they are major investors up to today, 2020. So they're still, keep on continuing, creating jobs, keep on investing. So it's solid, and these are not few cases. It's, let's say, a lot of cases. So from my point of view, it's like there's still a lot of projects that are in the pipe that will not be stopped. So now it's the question of how we have to push this project to make them go through the COVID and persist in the long term. So it's really how to make them successful, to be able to encourage, it's a kind of example for the others to come. So we're talking about large projects, large multinationals. Yes, of course. And also the point here is to, of course, make them, choose a project that are sustainable for the development of the country, and that has a real social, environmental, and economic positive impact. Now on a smaller level, so of course smaller level, smaller investments, right? But still it's investment. So I can think of some brands that were launched here during COVID. So especially March and April, some of our members launched some brands during COVID crisis. So it means that they were recruiting during COVID crisis. It was creating jobs. So of course you can say these are very few cases, but still, it means that COVID did not prevent them for, going ahead during this time of crisis. And they have, hired, of course, local employees, are investing, massively in marketing and everything. And what I wanted to say, the bottom line is that it works. So let's say now, I would say, from my point of view, the virtual setup of offices in some of the sector, consumer goods, for example, it's possible. Let's say the always now are almost gone for this. So I've experienced it myself. I would say, thank God, there's still DHL to be able to sign the contract, for both parties. But it means that you can still, in a way, maintain a certain level of business. But again, I want to insist, I understand it's smaller level, but it's working, and it's creating jobs.
Thank you very much for that. Again, as we all know, investment comes when we start developing our market. So, what do you think in terms of how do we get these? You're one of the most resourceful, Myanmar representing the American chambers and convincing people to invest in here. What would you like to say even more to get countries from overseas, especially American companies, to invest more in Myanmar?
Thank you very much, Komocho. We talked about the challenges in global economy earlier, and even before this pandemic, there are challenges. Bifurcation of global economy, shifting trade and investment flows. But that was going to create tremendous opportunities for Myanmar, even before the pandemic. American supply chains and capital were also relocating. So I'm sure you have seen reports like a fifth of the US companies in China are considering relocating some or all of their production out of China. And some are delaying investment decisions in China. That actually presents a lot of opportunities to attract these American companies, like what India and Vietnam or Cambodia did recently. We also saw the benefits in Myanmar already anyway, where labor-intensive exports were growing really, really fast before this pandemic. Now, that's similar to, in fact, the path of other successful Asian tigers, including China. But we do need to watch out for things on the ground today, what I call the job destroying behaviors and frameworks. such as land use planning and policies, rule of law, handling labor disputes, regulatory inconsistency, and poor infrastructure. So looking at the trends in globally assets under management, private and public markets, and also considering the size of opportunities that Myanmar economy can attract, there's a lot of money out there in the US for Myanmar today. But as I alluded earlier, you still have to compete for that. So what can potential, so one of the things that we do as AmCham is to encourage partnerships with local businesses that actually create opportunities. Please understand that many companies, many businesses outside the countries that Myanmar used to partner with in the past, in the last decade, etc., it's actually business to business. It's not government to government. And in fact, the governments of countries like the US also encourage the private partnerships. So what can we expect for, as potential local businesses, potential partners of American business here? What can they expect? So number one, I would say don't be afraid of new partnerships and mergers with responsible investors. You can also trade with the US and connect in the region because there is a growing regional demand. And as the trade flows are shifting or moving around, it's a great opportunity presented for Myanmar. Just simply trade and taking advantage of where Myanmar is and logistical support that Myanmar can provide. And that can create a lot of jobs here. Second, take advantage of time-honored ways of doing business by responsible business, American business, and the capital. You have potential American business investors or partners or suppliers, and they are now backed by support from the likes of U.S. Development Finance Corporation, which has, they have increased the lending limit to $60 billion. That money is available for private sector. And you can work within the activities of the USAID. These initiatives are great. Let us know, and we'll support you to forge these partnerships. Investors are also watching, but I just want to highlight here, we can expect a lot, but at the same time, what are they watching? A few other conditions. To realize that potential investment, there must also be peace and stability on the ground. We can't really walk away from that. Not just the control on the virus spread, but also the outcome of the peace process here. Unrestricted flow of information that will help the economic activities, including access to internet by everyone and every business. These are important. Lastly, it's really important to see political and social stability surrounding upcoming elections. I hope that summarized my response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pukumama. Again, very detailed and very precise. Peter, also being chair of the British Myanmar Chamber of Commerce, you also represent a very, very big investment company called Jardine Matheson, and you're in charge of 2 countries. So obviously, you're the perfect person because you look at these countries and you make sure that your investments pays back. So during these crises over here, what do you think how would you think we will stand in getting more foreign investments in the next 12 months? And what do we really need to do, if possible, to accelerate it?
Thank you, Umocha. I endorse everything that U Kin has just said, and indeed Sarah. I mean, the geopolitical parameters of Myanmar make it in the long term a hugely attractive investment destination for companies such as Jardine Matheson, those whose past and indeed whose future is very much embedded in Asia. One has envisage a very long-term future for Myanmar. The issue that one has, of course, is the allocation of a scarce resource being capital, and you need then to choose which market do you choose in which time. So it's not a question of if, in my view, it's only a question of when. one invests, and at what levels and to what level of investment do you make into Myanmar? So Myanmar, nothing that's happened in the past detracts from the long-term opportunity of investment in Myanmar. Let me make that very clear. But there are some major impediments that cloud the international investment's desire for immediate investment in Myanmar. And one would highlight just a couple here. The grey listing of Myanmar and the anti-money laundering task force, that is seen as a major impediment. It impedes the smooth and efficient flow of capital to the market. And obviously, whatever Myanmar can do to remove itself from this grey listing would be positive. And I was speaking to Sean Turnell yesterday or the day before yesterday. And there are a number of steps that Myanmar is taking to be able to actively withdraw, to ensure that Myanmar comes off that in a fairly timely fashion. The second issue I think we addressed earlier on was the reputational risk when you do invest in countries. And the issue that pervades Myanmar at this particular time continues to be the legacy of the events in Rakhine in 2018. And this is highlighted in investors' mind on a continuous basis now that we have this ongoing court case in the International Court of Justice at The Hague. This is a sword of Damocles which one sees hanging over Myanmar, and when you look at the issue of human rights, which are increasingly sustainable human rights, and looking at sustainability investment in the short and the whole portfolio of issues that sustainability actually means, then this is a very relevant issue in the mind of the investors. I then highlight one would be the issue that U Khin has also mentioned. That's the inconsistent and changing application of the rule of law, and the changing environment that the government continues to bring in various sectors, such as the automotive sector, where overnight they change the duty rates, they promote SKD as an investment, and then they change the duty rate to make CBU somewhat more attractive. There appears to be a consistent vision for industries like this. Seems to be somewhat lacking at a holistic level from the government perspective. And business in general needs to see consistent, a consistent and a defined planning horizon in which to make significant investments, such as those in the automotive sector. And so, a consistent application of the rule in law and the consistent vision which the government needs to set, and that is the function of the government, to set the vision for the country. That I feel has been is an area which is lacking, which has been deficient in the past. And the elections in November always breeds a level of uncertainty in the minds of the investors. But there are of course reasons to be cheerful, and I certainly don't want to throw too much cold water on this particular issue, because as I mentioned before, there are these large infrastructure projects, including those under the BRI. The Belt and Road Initiative from China, which are coming slowly to fruition, and I think in the near term we will start to see some concrete actions in the development of these. There's also the East-West corridor linking Vietnam, Thailand, and Dawei. I think this is another major project which the linkages which then brings us to the region will see some major advantages for Myanmar. Obviously, then you have the China Plus One issue, which U Khin has also mentioned, because many countries now are looking at the opportunity to divest and to diversify the supply base. And Myanmar, I think, together with its surrounding markets, presents an opportunity to the industrial base to look at an opportunity to diversify that supply base. And so I think you'll find a number of businesses are looking at Myanmar, looking at Cambodia, looking at Thailand, Vietnam, to diversify and to broaden their expansion there. Finally, you know, I think the other major attraction for many people to Myanmar is that its economy is at such a low level, and so the opportunity for our economy here to grow by integer times, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times is significant. I mean, that's for me is the huge excitement about investing in Myanmar, is you're looking at multiples of growth. Whereas you look at developed economies, you know, you get excited when you get 2-3% growth. Whereas you can, over a relatively short period of time, you'll see the economy in Myanmar double, triple, quadruple. So I think these are the exciting opportunities.
So looking into that aspect, you know, I've again been in Myanmar over here. There was a saying that if you want to find Myanmar in any statistical books or global economy, look at the bottom. Look at the bottom in terms of GDP, in terms of growth, and in terms of health issues, in terms of education. If you want to find Myanmar's race, easy, just look at the bottom. But now if you look at the bottom in terms of countries affected by this pandemic, that bottom means we're at the very, very top. Actually, if you look at any statistics, Myanmar in the whole world being affected by this pandemic is right at the very top 5 in terms of our population and the area and everything is. So with that in mind, to know that we're really one of the least affected countries in the world, the bottom figure has now come up to the top for us. In terms of recovery, is recovery started to happen now? Are we recovering? Or is the pandemic, are we still suffering? And if the recovery is not happening now, how will the recovery start happening in the next 12 months? And more importantly, are you and your members confident that the next 12 months is about recovery? Or is it about still being stable, looking at the headaches that's going to happen, the difficulties that happen? So the question is the recovery starting to happen now for Myanmar? If not, are you confident that in the next 12 months, we will be on the phase of recovery, which means businesses will start having more money to do more stuff. And again, economies will be better and so on. So I'd like to start with Peter, if you can come to that. You're also in charge of Cambodia. Yeah, so we have an idea of what's happening in Cambodia. And again, well, here, are you confident that we're on the stage of recovery in the next 12 months?
Thank you very much indeed. I'm more confident when I hear Bill Gates had a conversation yesterday, I think it was, with in conversation with The Economist magazine, and he is confident that the end of 2021 will see the end of the issue of the COVID pandemic. So he is confident that they will have a vaccine and that mankind will achieve some victory over the pandemic. So he sees that there is very much this light at the end of that tunnel. So when somebody who's as well networked and as well versed with the issue, because he's been working in that sector for some time, is positive, then that gives me a lot of encouragement. So that fills me with a degree of confidence. I personally, I mean, because as we sit here today, Komocho, I don't think anybody has got a crystal ball to say that the turnaround's going to come by the end of the year or be the end of January, end of March. I mean, I think we're very much living life on a week-to-week, day-to-day, month-to-month basis. You know, when are we going to start to be able to fly commercial flights coming into to Myanmar? When are we going to be able to when am I going to be able to next go to Cambodia for that matter? I haven't been able to go since March. So, I mean, I've been able to do my coordination with Cambodia via Zoom. So I'm a Zoom addict, like many people. But I think when we can start to see things easing up, which will be sometime in the near future, then the recovery will start to take effect. Myanmar, obviously, and indeed Cambodia, when those economies which are more linked to the international markets will take a little bit longer to start to develop. Myanmar itself, which is more integrated or more dependent on its domestic market, I think is likely to bounce back somewhat quicker. So when you talk to the economists and you talk to the world pundits, they most actually have Myanmar at the top of that particular list again. Komocho, they see that Myanmar is one of those countries whose bounce back ability will be demonstrated to be at the upper quartile of economies of this world. And I can see that would be very much the case. It is a very agile economy. Its people and the youth of its population would demonstrate to me that it has that capability of bouncing back very, very quickly. And it's already looking at new and innovative ways, and the SME sector is growing. It's growing fast. If we can continue to build the financial capabilities to fund the SME sector and the small and medium sector, then that would obviously enhance the ability to bounce back quicker. But that, together with the large infrastructure projects, gives me confidence that Myanmar will be one of those countries that were able to bounce back that much quicker. If you look at Cambodia, by contrast, I think it has a larger sword of Damocles hanging over its particular head, since it's lost the partial loss of its EBA status for the export of garments, and so it's struggling to understand which business sector will be its engine of growth for the future. So I think from my perspective, Myanmar is more likely and has the opportunity to bounce back that much quicker.
Thank you very much. Sarah, you were saying early on that your members are starting to market your products and sales are happening. So are you confident that we're in a recovery phase and things are going to get better?
I'm quite optimistic, yes. So I wanted to highlight, first of all, the reputation that Myanmar has, among all the financial institutions, because they keep highlighting from year to year the concept of Myanmar resilience, right? So Myanmar people, Myanmar economy are resilient. So they used to rely on themselves. We know all of this for decades, and during even harder times than COVID. So we can also, witness the extraordinary solidarity among the people, because they really help one another during crucial times. So let's say on my point of view, and of course it's just some sector. I cannot, say that it's everywhere the same. But some of the sectors, I would say, have already recovered. I have been talking to some chain stores. So I'm not talking about the food sector, not chain food retailers, but more like, on the cosmetic side or on the pharma side. So of course, they have been impacted by the lockdown in April. So if, let's say April was lockdown, it was also Tingjan, traditionally. So all the sales went down, but most of them that have reopened in May told me that all their sales were back to normal, and it's a pre-COVID, pre-COVID level. So which is amazing. And then, of course, from my personal point of view, and all the brands that were launched during COVID, I can attest that yes, it's working. And all, even though my brand was very low sales in April, but starting in May and up to now, it has reached the initial target. So I really hope, in a way, I see in my sector recovery, because it's working, and the sellout and everything, it keeps on rolling. So I really hope that it will be also the case, for the other sectors soon. But anyway, I'm optimistic, as I said, and I'm sure also Myanmar people, Myanmar economy, they're innovative, they're inventive. So I hope to see, more new things popping up, even though there's COVID.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Again, Peter, Sarah, optimism started to look good, but now just recently in the last 2 days, we're all suddenly being very scared of maybe the second wave hitting us. And obviously, we're going to learn from the countries that have been affected most. So, Uki Mawing, there is a bit of optimism around. Should we continue to be a little bit optimistic, or should we still be prepared, still worried? What are your viewpoints on for the confidence? Should we not overjump the gun? What do you feel that we need to do to get us through the next 12 months as businesses? You know, what should we be doing generally? In a way, you're a businessman. What will you be doing in the next 12 months to cope with this? Yeah. So can you just tell us and you know, if there's any, and I would like to maybe say the concluding statement for the speakers in Myanmar as well, seeing as we're going to have a lot of Myanmar viewers watch this as well. So Ko Kim Mawin, please, let's just forget the fact that you're AmCham chair, you're a businessman, you're an engineer, you know that you go to all the rural areas and build roads and so on. So for the next 12 months, how are you going to cope as a businessman?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that opportunity also. I think we can't simply let our guards down. I mean, the virus is still out there. It's very commendable, and we're very, very lucky where we are today in Myanmar. Well done to the government and everyone here. I think the government listened to the expert recommendations. But uncontrolled outbreak, as we alluded earlier, will translate to more movement restrictions that will delay any restart for businesses, my business as well. So we can't talk about the recovery if we still have to worry about our health and if we still have to wear that mask. So as long as there is a need to wear the mask and that maintain that distance from each other, the risk is still out there for our lives. That means, you know, we will have to be extremely careful. So I think Myanmar, as long as Myanmar can continue to keep the spread under control, there are things that we can do even with travel restrictions, because people who needs to work here, unfortunately, of course, it has a very bad impact on tourism industry, and you will have to create alternative solutions locally, domestically. But the reality is there are a lot of opportunities, there are a lot of things that can be done in Myanmar. It's the domestic volume can still be worked on. So yes, in a summary, I'm very, very confident that the business recovery can happen at a faster rate. I mean, that's exactly what I'm personally looking at as well. Right? So we're investing in training, we're investing in the right expansion of economic activities. So I have to go back to a little bit of the bigger numbers as well here. I mean, World Bank baseline GDP growth projection for Myanmar for the next financial year is 7.2%. That is impressive. And of course, these numbers don't apply to all sectors and all activities of the economy, but they are positive nonetheless. And it means there is a lot of resilience in the system. As a business person, I'm speaking on behalf of myself as well. We have the confidence that Myanmar has ability to recover at a faster rate compared to many other markets. But you got to do other things so that we can actually compete in that market professionally, right? So we touched a bit on infrastructure as we alluded earlier. Myanmar today is still sitting on a number of non-performing MOUs in hydroelectric projects. It's been like it's sitting there for ages, for years. Underperforming SOEs. Please fix that. So private sector can play that role, and the funds can be channeled, opportunities can be channeled, and in fact, basically restarting that engine. So those engines are almost like a black start. You know, it's like a small part of the economy, what we call a black starting economy. I mean, it's not an entire economy. You can't really work on everything because you have limited funding, you have a limited resources. But those areas will black start the economy. Private sector will help, development partners will help, and companies like ours, AmCham can definitely assist. So we encourage the government to continue engagement with the private sector to figure out how best to deliver that in the next 12 months, as you mentioned. The level of economic activity in retail, transportation, manufacturing, until normality returns in health sector. So that we can end these containment measures safely and for good. So the reality is we still have to live with it. We have to learn to live with it. Do we have the confidence? Yes. Everyone can agree on the resilience of Myanmar. And look, I'll go back. I need to touch again a bit on American companies. American companies don't send thousands of workers over here. And in times like this, a lot are seeing the benefits of these skill developed over the years. Our members follow the rules, pay taxes, make sure that everybody's doing that at the same time. It's tough for some businesses, and some of these businesses will not return at all, will disappear forever. Please don't get distracted or discouraged about where we are today. You know, it's a pause and a reset. And as a business person, that's how we're looking at it. We will come out stronger together. So let's focus on training our workforce, develop the right conditions for competitive business activities, and follow the rules. So my last note is, you know, encourage the government to continue reforms, develop partnerships, these continued partnerships, and encourage responsible investment and trade here. Thank you very much, Komucho, for the opportunity to speak here today.
Thank you very much, Yuki Maureen. Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Sarah. We had a discussion of how we were going to conduct this, but today I'm very, very fortunate to be amongst you three and to be able to use this platform to tell our viewers, tell businesses, tell the government that it looks as though we are very resilient. The fact that we are the least affected country, need a bit of resilience to do that. We're resilient. The fact that you all see a light at the end of the tunnel, it looks as though that light can be getting stronger and stronger. We have to be a little bit careful not to overestimate it, but your reassurance and say you're stuck in Myanmar, you're in Myanmar, we have the resilience to work harder, to be focused. So for that, thank you very much on behalf of UMFCCI. And I hope we get a chance to do further discussions and discussions like this.